March the 18th, 2024. Caribbean Sea, 82 miles north of La Guaira. 3:47 a.m. local time. 3 Venezuelan Navy gunboats slipped out of their berths under a total communications blackout. Proyecto-class patrol craft, Soviet-built hulls from the 1970s carrying twin 25mm autocannons and aging radar systems. Their mission brief was simple: intercept the American destroyer reported operating inside Venezuela's extended economic zone, collect footage, make a statement. The squadron commander didn't question the intelligence. His orders came directly from naval headquarters in Caracas. 1 American warship, running solo, approximately 75 miles offshore. An easy intercept. What the intelligence packet didn't mention was when that report had been filed, 48 hours earlier. In naval terms, that's a lifetime. By 4:19 a.m., the Venezuelan boats were pushing 38 knots, hulls pounding against the 3-foot swells. No running lights, no radio traffic, just the sound of diesel engines screaming and salt spray hammering windscreens. Meanwhile, 68 miles to the northwest, different screens were lighting up. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class carrier displacing nearly 97,000 tons, a radar technician leaned closer to his display. 3 contacts, small, fast, bearing 175 degrees, range 41 miles. CIC, we've got surface movers inbound from the south, designated Sierra 1 through 3. The voice came back calm. Copy. Classification? Unknown. Speed suggests patrol craft. They're not squawking transponders. Within 90 seconds, the entire strike group knew Lincoln wasn't alone out here. She was escorted by 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS Porter and USS James E. Williams, plus the guided missile cruiser Monterey running air defense coordination. 5 warships, linked by data link, all seeing the same 3 radar contacts closing from Venezuelan waters. The carrier's captain stood from his chair. Adjust formation. Put the destroyers forward. Let's see what they want. On the main display, blue icons representing American ships began shifting positions. The destroyers moved ahead, creating a protective barrier. The cruiser slid starboard, opening firing angles. Every weapon station went on standby. Phalanx systems powered up, vertical launch cells armed, and those 3 Venezuelan boats still racing north in the dark had no idea what they were about to run into. At 4:33 a.m., the Venezuelan lead boat's radar operator finally got a solid return. Single large contact, bearing steady, 34 miles out. The signature matched their briefing sheet. Big, slow, alone, perfect. Their commander keyed his radio to the other 2 boats. Target confirmed. Maintain an approach vector. They had no idea that single contact was actually 5 ships sailing in the tight formation, their radar returns merging into one massive echo on the outdated Venezuelan scope. Aboard the Porter, the tactical action officer watched the contacts close. 32 miles now, still inbound, still silent. Broadcast warning on channel 16. The radio operator sent it out. Venezuelan naval vessels. This is a United States warship bearing 015. You are approaching a U.S. Navy formation operating in international waters. State your intentions. Static. No response. The Venezuelan boats kept coming. What they were actually racing toward wasn't just a ship. It was a carrier strike group. At the center, the USS Abraham Lincoln, nuclear-powered 1,092 feet of armored flight deck carrying 64 aircraft. Supercarriers don't travel alone, ever. Flanking her port side, the destroyer USS Porter, 9,200 tons, equipped with the Aegis combat system and 96 vertical launch cells, loaded with SM-2 surface-to-air missiles, Tomahawks, and anti-ship ordnance. Every cell ready to fire on command. Starboard, the destroyer James E. Williams, identical loadout, same firepower, same mission, keep anything hostile away from the carrier. Running over 8,000 yards north, the cruiser Monterey, Ticonderoga class, bristling with SPY-1 radar arrays that could track a seagull at 200 miles. Her job was simple: see everything, kill anything that threatens the group. Above the formation, 2 SH-60 Seahawk helicopters orbited at 800 feet, their sensors sweeping the surface. Infrared, radar, magnetic anomaly detection. Nothing moved in these waters without the strike group knowing. Inside the Lincoln's Combat Information Center, every screen showed the same picture. 3 red triangles crawling toward 5 blue squares. Range, 28 miles, and closing. The air warfare coordinator spoke into his headset. All stations, this is Alpha Whiskey. Condition 2, weapons tight unless ordered. That meant one thing. Don't fire, but be ready to fire instantly. On the flight deck, an FA-18 Super Hornet sat loaded and fueled, pilot strapped in, engines warm, just in case this turned into something more than a curious patrol. At 4:48 a.m., Porter tried again. Venezuelan craft, you are entering a restricted operating area. Alter course to heading 180 immediately. Still nothing. The Venezuelan squadron commander checked his chart. According to his briefing, they were chasing one American destroyer running a solo freedom of navigation patrol. Standard stuff. Get close. Film it. Turn away. Make the news cycle back home. His radar tech squinted at the screen. Comandante, that return is very large for a destroyer. American ships always have big signatures. Stay on course. What that radar tech was seeing wasn't sensor error. It was reality trying to break through bad intelligence. At 4:52 a.m., the Venezuelan boats crossed into visual range, and that's when the lead boat's lookout raised his binoculars toward the horizon and saw something that made his stomach drop. Not a destroyer, a floating airport. The lookout lowered his binoculars, raised them again. Still there. A supercarrier. The island tower reaches 10 stories high. Flight deck stretches longer than 3 football fields. And surrounding it, warships in defensive formation, their silhouettes sharp against the pre-dawn horizon. Comandante, that's not a destroyer. The Venezuelan commander grabbed the binoculars. One look and his training kicked in. That radar signature wasn't one ship bleeding into multiple returns. It was multiple ships operating as one unit. They'd been chasing a carrier strike group. Aboard the Porter, radar tracking went active. Fire control systems locked onto all 3 Venezuelan boats simultaneously. The SPY-1D radar lit them up so hard that every alarm panel in those patrol craft started screaming. Missile lock, missile lock, missile lock. At 4:56 a.m., one of the Seahawks helicopters dropped to 400 feet, banking hard toward the approaching boats. Its FLIR camera zoomed in. 3 patrol craft, roughly 50 feet each, wooden-hulled Soviet surplus. Men visible on deck. Weapons manned but not aimed. The pilot called it in. Sierra contacts confirmed. Venezuelan naval vessels, guns visible but not trained on us. They're slowing. They were slowing, but they weren't stopping. Inside the Lincoln's Combat Information Center, the tactical picture updated in real time. Range, 14 miles. Speed, 32 knots and decreasing. Course, still inbound. Why aren't they turning? The carrier's executive officer asked. Nobody had an answer. Not yet. The truth was simple but ugly. Venezuelan naval intelligence had pulled satellite positioning data from 2 days prior. The Lincoln Strike Group had been operating 120 miles north at that time, well outside Venezuelan concerns. But overnight, the carrier had shifted south for flight operations, moving into the exact corridor where Venezuela ran its coastal patrols. The Venezuelan boats weren't hunting. They were responding to what they thought was an American provocation. A lone destroyer pushing boundaries, testing response times. Their intel was real, it just wasn't current. At 5:03 a.m., the Venezuelan commander made his decision. They'd come this far, turning back it empty-handed meant explaining failure to Caracas, so he did what his orders told him to do. He closed to visual documentation range, his boats accelerated again, 35 knots, angling toward the Porter's starboard bow. The American destroyer adjusted course, keeping herself between the patrol craft and the carrier. The ship's 5-inch gun rotated, tracking the lead boat automatically. Not aimed, just following. Another radio call went out. Venezuelan vessels, this is your final warning. You are approaching a United States aircraft carrier. Alter course immediately, or you will be treated as hostile. The Venezuelan commander understood English perfectly. He also understood optics. If he turned away now, the footage would show Venezuelan boats fleeing from Americans. If he held course just a little longer, just close enough for his cameraman to film the carrier, he could return with proof that Venezuela stood up to U.S. Navy intimidation. He keyed his radio. American warship, you're operating inside our economic zone. We are conducting lawful patrol. That wasn't true. International maritime law put them 82 miles offshore, well outside territorial waters. But facts don't matter when politics are involved. The Porter's captain heard the transmission. He recognized it for what it was. Theater. A show for domestic consumption. But theater gets dangerous when live weapons are involved. At 5:09 a.m., the The Venezuelan lead boat crossed inside 10 miles, close enough to see aircraft on the Lincoln's deck, close enough to count the destroyer's weapon mounts, close enough for the Americans to run out of patience. 5:11 a.m. The Venezuelan lead boat swung wide, 8,000 yards off the Porter's beam. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Just engines, just waves, just the sound of metal moving through water. Then the Venezuelan gunner opened up. 2 short bursts from the 25mm autocannon, not aimed at the destroyer. Aimed into the water 200 yards ahead of the American bow. Tracer rounds arcing orange across the dark sea. Warning shots. Inside the Porter's Combat Information Center, every screen flashed red. Weapons fire, weapons fire. Venezuelan lead boat has discharged firearms. The captain's response was immediate. General quarters. Set condition 1 throughout the ship. Alarms blared, hatches sealed. Damage control teams scrambled to their stations. This wasn't a drill anymore. Aboard the Lincoln, the tactical action officer's voice cut through the command circuit. All units, weapons free for defensive fire. Rules of engagement. If fired upon, return fire immediately. That single transmission changed everything. On the Porter, the Mk-45 5-inch gun swung hard, barrel locking onto the lead Venezuelan boat. The gun crew loaded high explosive rounds. One order, and that patrol craft would vanish in a fireball. Forward of the bridge, the phalanx close-in weapon system spun up. 6 rotating barrels, each capable of spitting 4,500 rounds per minute. Radar-guided, fully automatic. Designed to shred incoming missiles, just as effective against small boats. The fire control radar painted all 3 Venezuelan craft. Targeting solutions calculated. Range, bearing, speed, wind, every variable locked. The Venezuelan commander saw the American gun barrels tracking his boats. He saw the angular white domes of the phalanx mounts rotating, and he realized too late what he'd just triggered. His boats weren't armed for a fight. They carried light machine guns and old autocannons meant for patrol work, for chasing smugglers, not for engaging Aegis destroyers backed by a nuclear carrier. One of his crew shouted from below deck, "We're being illuminated! Fire control radar! Multiple sources!" The missile warning receivers were screaming. Not 1 lock, not 2. Every American ship in the formation had them targeted simultaneously. At 5:13 a.m., the James E. Williams shifted position, moving to cut off any retreat angle. The Monterey's SBY-1 radar tracked every ripple on the water within 150 miles. The Seahawk helicopters climbed to weapons release altitude, door gunners manning their M240 machine guns. The Venezuelan boats were boxed in. North, the carrier. East and west, destroyers. South, the cruiser closing the gap. Inside the Lincoln CIC, the captain stood with his arms crossed, watching the tactical display. 3 red triangles surrounded by blue icons. Weapon systems primed. Fingers on triggers. He lifted his radio. "All stations, maintain lock. Do not fire unless I give the command or they fire directly at us." But below deck in the missile magazines, launch systems had already cycled to ready status. Hatches were open, ordnance was armed. The American response had already begun to unfold. 5:14 a.m. The Venezuelan boats began turning, slowly, not a retreat, just a wide arc that would take them back toward territorial waters. For 15 seconds, it looked like the standoff was ending. Then the middle boat, hull number PG-62, broke formation. Instead of following the lead craft south, it accelerated north, angling directly toward the gap between the Porter and the Lincoln. Contact 2 has altered course. Bearing 035, speed increasing, 42 knots. The Porter's captain didn't hesitate. "Come right to heading 040. Put us between that boat and the carrier." The destroyer surged forward, 9,200 tons of steel cutting across the Venezuelan craft's projected path. The James E. Williams mirrored the move from the opposite side, creating a wall. At 5:15, the Porter fired 2 green star clusters. International maritime signal. Turn away immediately. The flares arced across the dark sky, burning bright green, impossible to miss. The Venezuelan boat didn't turn. On the Porter's bridge wing, a lookout raised his binoculars. He could see the patrol craft clearly now, men on deck. One crouched behind the forward gun mount. Then he saw the gunner's hands move, pulling the charging handle back. The metallic sound carried across the water, faint but unmistakable. "Bridge, forward lookout. Contact 2 has armed their deck gun." That single report sent the American formation into its final defensive posture. The phalanx system switched from standby to automatic engagement mode. If that Venezuelan gun barrel rotated toward any American ship, the CIWS would fire without human input. 20mm tungsten rounds at 75 rounds per second. The Porter's 5-inch gun tracked. Solution locked. Finger on the trigger. Inside the Lincoln CIC, the captain's hand hovered over the communication panel. One word, and this turns into a firefight. The Venezuelan boat closed to 200 yards, then 1,000. The Seahawk pilot called it down. Contact is inside defensive perimeter. Recommend... The patrol craft suddenly heeled hard to starboard, engines screaming, throwing a rooster tail of white water 30 feet high. The bow swung away from the carrier. The turned so violent that one crewman grabbed the rail to keep from going overboard. The other two Venezuelan boats followed, racing south at full throttle. At 5:17 a.m., radar confirmation came through. All contacts departing, bearing 175, range opening. The weapons stayed hot. The radars stayed locked. Because everyone on those American ships knew one thing. Just because they're running now doesn't mean this is over. 6:20 a.m. The Caribbean was empty again. No Venezuelan boats on radar. No engine noise on sonar. Just the strike group holding course. Speed 18 knots, heading northwest. But the weapons stayed armed for another 40 minutes. Fire control radars tracked the retreating contacts until they disappeared behind the coastal radar clutter near La Guaira. Only then did Lincoln's captain give the order. Condition 2. Secure from general quarters. Maintain elevated readiness. Sailors stood down from battle stations. Gun mounts returned to standby. Missile hatches closed. But nobody relaxed. Not yet. By 8 a.m., Venezuelan state television was already running footage. Grainy video shot from one of the patrol boats showed their vessels racing across open water. The voiceover claimed they had successfully intercepted an American naval incursion and forced the foreign warships to withdraw from Venezuelan's sovereign waters. No mention of the carrier, no mention of the warning shots. Just 3 patrol boats are defending the homeland. In Washington, the Pentagon's response came 3 hours later. A terse statement confirming that U.S. Navy vessels had been operating in international waters, more than 80 nautical miles from Venezuelan territory. They released GPS coordinates, satellite timestamps, radar logs showing the exact position of every ship involved. The data was irrefutable. The Lincoln Strike Group had never crossed into Venezuela's 200-mile exclusive economic zone. But facts don't win political battles. Each side had its narrative. Venezuela called it a defensive action against American aggression. The U.S. called it reckless brinkmanship by an undertrained naval force. Diplomatically, phones started ringing. The State Department contacted counterparts in Caracas through back channels. Not to apologize, just to make sure everyone understood how close things had come. A U.S. Navy spokesperson told reporters it was a routine encounter. Off the record, Pentagon officials called it something else entirely. The most dangerous incident in Caribbean waters since the Cold War. By the following morning, Abraham Lincoln quietly shifted her operating area 200 miles farther north. The Venezuelan patrol squadron returned to port under radio silence. Their crews debriefed behind closed doors. Both governments moved on publicly, but every sailor who'd been there knew the truth. That kind of close call doesn't stay routine for long. Here's what most people don't understand about naval confrontations. Modern warships don't fail because of bad technology. They fail because of bad information. The Venezuelan squadron was working with 48-hour-old intelligence. In the Caribbean, where carrier groups shift positions overnight for flight ops, 2 days might as well be 2 weeks. By the time those patrol boats launched, the tactical picture had completely changed. Add outdated radar systems that can't distinguish individual ships in a tight formation, and you get exactly what happened here. 3 boats charging toward what they thought was a lone destroyer, realizing too late they'd cornered a carrier strike group. Naval strategists call it the compression problem. When both sides interpret defensive moves as offensive threats, the window for de-escalation shrinks fast. One commander's self-defense looks like aggression to the other side, and in that gap, mistakes become disasters. The truth is, for all the advanced sensors and automated systems, modern naval warfare still runs on human judgment. One misread radar screen, one nervous gunner, one captain who hesitates a second too long or fires a second too early. That's the difference between a tense encounter and an international crisis. So here's the question. You're commanding that destroyer. Patrol boats are approaching fast. Warning shots already fired. They're 1,000 yards out and still closing. Do you wait and risk taking fire, or do you engage first and then deal with the consequences? Drop your answer below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button and share it with anyone who's into real naval confrontations. Subscribe so you catch the next close call when it surfaces. And if you want to support the channel and get loyalty badges plus priority replies, click that join button and come aboard. In the end, the Venezuelan Navy didn't just pick the wrong target. They picked the worst possible morning to trust old maps. See you in the next one.